Hey guys, tonight we're taking a sleepy little detour through the candlelit corridors and dusty staircases of a noble household. You're not a guest, though. Nope. You're not even invited to the fancy dinners. You're a servant, and your shift starts before dawn. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, that's kind of the point. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love for you to comment your location and what time it is where you are. I always read those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise before the sun, before the rooster, before the master, and long before breakfast. The fire in the hearth is still dead, and the stone floor is cold enough to slap the sleep right out of your bones. You wince as your bare feet touch it, wrap yourself in a rough woolen shawl, and immediately begin your morning ritual. Quiet, precise, invisible. It's not that you aren't tired. You're always tired. But this world doesn't wait for your body to cooperate. The noble house hums with a rhythm you must follow or be swallowed by. Your first task? Stoke the hearth fire. That means squatting low in last night's ashes, hands blackened, lungs filled with smoke even before the day officially begins. The others are still stirring in the servants' quarters, some groaning softly, some already at the pump filling buckets. Water's always the next thing. You carry it upstairs, careful not to spill. The pail handle bites into your fingers and your arms tremble, but you've learned to walk without shaking. A splash on the polished floor means a lecture, or worse. You pass a narrow window and see the first stretch of morning light catching on the frost outside. The garden, the stables, the forest beyond. It's all waking up. But you've been awake long enough to feel like the day's half over already. There's no time for your own grooming. Maybe you splash a bit of cold water on your face. Maybe. But your sleeves are already wet and your hands red from scrubbing the master's copper shaving bowl. He likes it warm, which means you'll have to run back down for hot water again. Quietly, always quietly. Historians still argue whether the life of a servant in the past was more stable or more brutal than common labor outside the house. There's evidence for both. You did get a roof, meals, sometimes even clothing, but also, you surrendered your entire existence to the whims of someone else's family drama. You descend the back staircase, worn thin by generations of steps just like yours. This path was never built for beauty. No paintings hang on these walls, just bare plaster, cracked and soot-smudged. You know every creak in the boards, every drafty spot where the wind whistles through the stone. The kitchen is beginning to stir now. The cook, red-faced and already furious about a missing basket of turnips, barks orders to a half-asleep scullery boy. You step around the shouting with the quiet grace of someone who has learned not to attract unnecessary attention. You pour the kettle, reheat it over the fire, and head back up with your spine straight and your mouth sealed. Upstairs, the air is completely different, warmer, scented faintly with lavender and beeswax polish. Carpets muffle your steps. Tapestries on the walls eat sound. It's like walking through a painting where you're not supposed to leave footprints. You lay out the shaving kit just as the master wakes. He doesn't say good morning. He doesn't look you in the eye. He might grunt. If he's in a good mood, he might not criticize the temperature of the water. You stand behind him, hands clasped, waiting for permission to pour or wipe or fetch. This is your place. Always nearby. Never present. There's something surreal about how quickly the house flips from stillness to chaos. Bells begin to ring, literal bells, strung through wires and pulleys, leading to different rooms. Each ring has a tone. You've learned to recognize them. Parlor bell, study bell, ladies' dressing chamber. Every chime means move, quickly, silently. Fun fact, many large noble houses had detailed servant codes, where you could walk, how you had to stand, even where you could speak. Some estates designed servant tunnels or hidden staircases just so the noble family wouldn't have to see you move about. You became part of the architecture, By mid-morning, you've been up for hours and have maybe eaten a crust of bread or half an apple. Maybe. There will be a proper servant breakfast once the family is sorted, but by then, your stomach is a hollow drum echoing beneath your apron. You take a moment, just one moment, to breathe in a corridor. A slant of sun hits the parquet floor and casts golden shadows against the walls. The house, in this brief second, feels almost magical. You hear the rustle of skirts above, the snap of linen, the low hum of aristocratic conversation seeping under doors. You exhale slowly and step into the next task, already rehearsing it in your head. Lay the clothes out. Fetch the dog. Find the brooch she always loses. Somewhere in the house a bell rings again, and so begins the next hour of your endless invisible day. You follow the bell. It's a high, sharp one, ladies' chamber. That means you'll need your polite face on, your spine extra straight, and your words tucked somewhere behind your teeth. You pause at the linen closet to grab a fresh towel and knock twice, soft knuckles on polished wood. The lady's maid is already there, fumbling with pins and sighing at a wrinkled gown. You slip in silently, offering the towel, catching the edge of an eye roll that isn't meant for you but passes through you anyway. That's what it's like, being a servant in a noble house, always in the line of fire, even when the gun isn't aimed your way. Lady So-and-so is sitting at the dressing table, brushing out her sleep-mussed curls and complaining that her night cream did nothing. You resist the temptation to agree. Instead, you hand her the small silver basin of warm water and step back. She dips her fingertips like royalty, which, to be fair, she kind of is. You're dismissed with a flutter of fingers. Downstairs again. This house is tall. Too tall. Every trip is stairs, more stairs, up again, down again, dodging nobility in brocade slippers and children who don't yet understand that servants aren't meant to be spoken to like real people. You slip into the pantry for a stolen mouthful of water. It's cool, slightly metallic, but refreshing. Your throat has been dry for over an hour. Outside the window you see one of the gardeners trimming hedges with a pair of shears that look older than you. You envy him, in a weird way. He works in open air, gets to breathe, maybe hum a little. You? You're part ghost, part decoration, part furniture. By the time breakfast for the family is served, silver trays, poached eggs, little pastries arranged like edible art, you're already helping set the drawing room for tea. Yes, tea. Already, because noble appetites run on their own time zone. You fold napkins, adjust spoons, refluff cushions, always fixing things no one noticed were broken. Historians still argue whether domestic servants in noble homes were exploited or simply following the best employment path available to the working poor. For some, these roles were prestigious, a step up from field labor at least. For others, it was a velvet prison. The thing is, you don't even dislike the work. It's not the scrubbing or carrying or polishing that wears you down. It's the invisibility, the quiet rules, the way you know everyone's secrets, but no one knows your name. A quirky tidbit. In some old manor houses, staff weren't allowed to walk through the front hall even when it was empty. Instead, a complicated network of side corridors and servant stairs allowed you to pop in and out of rooms like stagehands. You were meant to appear, poof, with the tea tray, then vanish again like mist. It's almost midday now, and you still haven't sat down. You help light the parlor fire even though it's only mildly chilly. Her ladyship doesn't like the shadows. You shake out the rug in the hall, listening to the distant sound of a harpsichord. Someone's practicing scales badly. You pray they stop. Finally, the kitchen calls you back. Lunch preparations have started, and you're handed a bag of potatoes and a paring knife. You sit on a low stool near the scullery, grateful to be still, even for just a moment. Your hands move automatically, the blade whispering against the peels. You hear the cook mutter something about the butcher arriving late and the goose being underweight. You keep your head down. Lunch is chaos. Footmen balancing trays, plates vanishing and reappearing like clockwork. You're not in the dining room. Your job is behind the scenes today. You ferry dishes to the warming shelf, refill the wine, collect the used linens. Someone drops a spoon. You retrieve it instantly. By the time you finally eat, it's a piece of cheese between tasks. No one announces it's your turn. You just find a window between duties, chew fast, and hope no one calls your name. Oh, and your name? It might not even be yours anymore. Fun fact, some servants were renamed by their employers to avoid confusion if someone else had the same name. Imagine being called Mary for 5 years when your real name is Alice. Now imagine someone calling you Alice again and you forgetting to answer. The afternoon brings more bells, more errands. You help clean the library, dusting shelves you're not allowed to read from. You straighten a portrait of someone long dead who would have never passed you the salt. You brush the mud off the gentleman's boots and polish them until your reflection stares back up at you, confused and a little smudged. There's an art to this invisibility. You learn to breathe softer when nobility walks past, to fold towels the way the housekeeper likes, to listen with your eyes, to apologize for footsteps. The sun is starting to dip behind the hedges now. It filters through the stained glass windows in the hallway and paints little rainbows on the marble floor. For one quiet moment it's just you, the echo of your breath, and the scent of polish lingering in the air. A bell rings again. By early evening, your limbs ache with a slow burn, the kind of tired that doesn't scream but just hums beneath the skin, constant and familiar. You're setting the dining table now, 7 places, crystal glasses that chime if you breathe too close. Silverware arranged like some unspoken code, outside in, forks on the left, soup spoons aligned like soldiers. The butler inspects your work with the gravitas of a man judging a national painting competition. He doesn't speak, just grunts and tilts his head. That's approval, apparently. You exhale and tuck the napkins a little tighter into their rings. The family dines at 7, sharp. You're not in the room when they eat. You're just off to the side, near the swinging door, standing completely still. One foot starts to fall asleep, but you can't shift your weight. If someone needs more water, you step in. If someone drops a fork, you appear with another. You're furniture with a heartbeat. Funny thing, aristocrats had entire books written on dining etiquette, not just how to eat, but how to be served. You've read none of them, but you live them daily. Don't clink the cutlery. Don't pour the wine too fast. Don't lock eyes with the guests unless they speak to you first. If they do speak to you, be polite, be brief, be invisible again immediately afterward. Tonight, they're hosting a guest. A man with a velvet cravat and a voice that carries. He cracks jokes about the French and everyone laughs. You refill his glass. He doesn't look at you. You're grateful for that. Back in the kitchen, dinner for the staff is a stew, slightly burnt. No one complains. The scullery maid hums a lullaby while drying plates. The cook complains about the guest's expensive taste in cheese. The rest of you just chew in tired, companionable silence. Historians still argue whether the class divide in noble homes was softened by proximity. Did working in the same house breed familiarity or further resentment? Some records show deep bonds between servants and employers. Others tell of years of loyal work met with a cold handshake and nothing more. After dinner, you're back upstairs, clearing the drawing room. Crumbs on the carpet, a spilled drop of brandy. Someone has left a slipper beneath a chair and it feels like a trap. Do you touch it? Do you wait for the lady to notice? You decide to leave it and make a note to mention it to her maid later. Not your job, not your blame. You check the lamps, replace one candle stub, adjust a painting that somehow tilted again. These are the little things no one thanks you for, but everyone notices if left undone. Your life is a game of fix it before they care. At night, the halls are quieter, but not silent. Floors creak. Wind whistles. Somewhere, a baby cries. One of the nursery maids is soothing it. You pass her on your way to the linen room. She looks exhausted. You offer her a nod. She nods back. That's the extent of your conversation for the day. You check the linens, folding and stacking until your fingers sting. You find one pillowcase with a tiny tear and place it in the repair basket. The housekeeper will want it mended by morning. You're not the one who sews it. That falls to another girl. But if you hadn't caught it, someone would have been blamed. You brush your hands off on your apron and exhale. The air smells like lavender water and boiled starch. It's oddly comforting, like the house itself is trying to sleep. Finally, you make your way toward the servants' quarters. They're in the attic, up the narrow back stairs, which groan like they resent your weight. The ceilings are slanted, the bed's narrow, the blankets thin. Still, it's yours. Your little patch of peace. Before you sleep, you scrub your face with cold water in a chipped basin and change into a nightgown that's seen better days. You brush your hair, just enough to keep it from tangling, and tuck it under a cloth. Somewhere below, the house exhales. You hear the last guest's carriage roll down the gravel path. A quirky fact: some noble houses installed speaking tubes, early intercoms that allowed the family to summon servants from distant corners of the house. Imagine being asleep, dreaming of fresh bread or clean air, and suddenly a brass pipe in the wall hisses with Lady Margaret's voice demanding her shawl. Welcome to your life. As you slip under the blanket, your muscles twitch with exhaustion. It's not glamorous, this life, but there's rhythm in it. And sometimes, just sometimes, you catch yourself humming while folding, smiling while polishing, feeling oddly proud when a dinner party goes off without disaster. Clean, quiet, still. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, the bells will ring again. The bell rings early. Always early. Long before the sun peeks through the ivy-cloaked windows of the east wing. You jolt awake in the attic room that somehow manages to be both stuffy and freezing. You dress quickly, fingers fumbling with stiff fabric. Corset laces if you're a woman, a waistcoat if you're a man. Layers over layers that do nothing to soften the cold stone beneath your feet. Today is laundry day. You carry baskets down the back stairs, careful not to knock the walls or let the boards creak too loudly. The family is still asleep. Their dreams, of opera, of estates, of candlelit waltzes, are worlds away from your reality of soap flakes and frost-bitten hands. The laundry room is already steamy, fire stoked high. The boiling copper pot lets off clouds of bitter vapor. A mix of ash lye, animal fat soap, and wet wool hits your nose like a punch. It doesn't matter how many times you do this. You never quite stop flinching at that first lungful. You dunk the first bundle of linen into the pot. It's heavy, still damp from last week's sweat, perfumes, and mystery stains. You stir with a long wooden paddle, like you're making porridge out of everyone's secrets. Fun historical fact: people back then believed that urine, yes, actual human urine, was an effective stain remover. Some households, not yours thankfully, even had chamber pot collections for this exact purpose. You've heard the stories. You choose not to ask questions. After boiling, the linens get scrubbed, by hand, on ridged boards that turn your knuckles raw and pink. You work with the other maids or manservants, depending on the house's size. Conversation is brief, punctuated by grunts and sloshing water. Someone sneezes. Someone hums a hymn. You try not to get splashed. Once scrubbed, everything's rinsed in freezing water from the courtyard pump. It takes 3 rinses to remove the soap, and even then, sometimes the sheets retain a faint hint of goose fat or lavender. That's the best-case scenario. You wring everything out and hang it over long ropes strung across the kitchen garden. The wind snaps at the corners like it's trying to pull the cloth away. You pin fast, fingers numb, lips cracked from cold. Historians still argue whether noble families genuinely appreciated the intense labor behind each crisp sheet, or if they simply believed laundry fairies made everything smell like rosemary and starch. Either way, they never saw the blisters. While the sheets dry, you return to clean the scullery. Dishes from last night's feast still tower beside the basin. Porcelain with gold trim, each requiring its own cleaning ritual. You scrape, soak, scrub, polish, and rinse. Your fingertips wrinkle like old parchment. One strange detail: some households hired a silver maid whose sole job was to polish the cutlery and silverware, daily. Imagine spending your entire life elbow-deep in tarnish remover. You don't envy her, but you kind of admire her too. Midday brings a quick break. You're allowed half a loaf of coarse bread, a wedge of crumbly cheese, and if you're lucky, broth left over from the family's lunch. You eat standing up, leaning against a doorframe, eyes closed for just a moment. Then it's ironing time. You haul the sheets and clothes back in, folding them neatly before running hot irons over every inch. No plug-ins here. These are cast iron beasts, heated over coals and swapped out as they cool. You test the temperature by holding them near your cheek. One wrong move and your knuckles could blister for weeks. There's something almost meditative about ironing, though. The hiss of steam, the scent of scorched linen, the way wrinkles vanish under pressure, like problems being temporarily erased. You press the family's garments with a precision born of repetition. One wrong crease, and the lady of the house might accuse the cook of sabotaging her Sunday gown. As the afternoon wanes, you deliver fresh sheets to each bedroom. You knock softly. Sometimes you're ignored. Sometimes you're greeted with a stiff nod or a distracted, "Leave it there." You rarely hear "thank you," but once in a blue moon, the youngest child smiles at you. That sticks in your chest longer than you expect. Some of the upstairs rooms are beautiful. Silk drapes, feather beds, china dolls that never get played with. You see these things in passing, never touching, always absorbing. It's strange, living in wealth without owning any of it. Like being backstage in someone else's performance, invisible but essential. You swap out the linens with speed and silence, fluff the pillows, straighten the corners, smooth the wrinkles like you're smoothing a memory, folding it tight and tucking it away. Evening approaches, and the final task for laundry day, mending. Torn seams, worn hems, missing buttons, all stacked in a basket by the sewing chair. You sit beside a flickering candle, needle in hand, patching the lives of those who'll never know your name. Your fingertips are calloused, your back aches. But each stitch is precise. You were trained that way. There's no room for uneven lines in a house that demands perfection. As you carry the final basket up the narrow stairs, your legs tremble, not from weakness, but from sheer repetition. This is laundry day. It always has been. It always will be. And as you finally wash your own face with cold basin water and lay your aching body down, you realize something absurd. You forgot to change your own linens. There's no alarm clock, just the sound of heavy boots on the stairwell and the sharp clang of a bell. Once, twice, then silence. That means the cook is waiting. You groan softly and pull yourself up from your cot, bones stiff from yesterday's work. Your legs know the way now, each creaky step, each turn around the banister in the dark. You reach the kitchen, and it's already buzzing. The big iron stove roars like a dragon, pots clanking, steam hissing. A roast is already turning on the spit. Someone's kneading dough. You don't ask what time it is. It's always almost too late. Your first job today? Fetch water. Always water. You grab the yoke and 2 buckets and head out to the well in the courtyard, the morning air sharp enough to slice. The buckets thud against your thighs as you walk, and the stone path bites through your thin soles. You haul the buckets up, one at a time, trying not to splash or slip. The water's heavy, heavier than it should be. By the time you're back in the kitchen, your shoulders ache and your hands are pink from the cold. One of the other servants thrusts a paring knife into your hand. Vegetable prep. You set to work. Potatoes, carrots, onions, peel, chop, scrape, repeat. The cook barks a few instructions without looking up. You nod and obey. There's no talking during meal prep, not unless it's necessary. The kitchen has its own language. Sharp glances, flicked fingers, steam puffs, tray scrapes. You learn to read it like music. Your fingers move on autopilot, one eye on the flame, the other on the door, in case the lady of the house decides to inspect things. A curious historical fact. Noble families didn't always eat what you cooked. Some houses kept tasting staff to sample dishes in case of poisoning, especially in politically unstable times. If you're lucky, Your employer's only fear is that the roast duck might be slightly dry. Mid-morning means service. You carry trays upstairs, carefully balanced, every step deliberate. Each plate must look untouched, pristine. A single drip of sauce on the edge could earn you a sharp scolding, or worse, a cold demotion to stable work. You knock, enter, curtsy, leave. One smooth performance, no applause. You catch brief glimpses of luxury. A soft dressing gown, a porcelain figurine, gold-threaded slippers kicked lazily under the chaise. You wonder what it's like to wake up and have breakfast appear like magic. Back downstairs, you start on dishes. Again, there are always more dishes. You wash and dry and stack and wash again. The scullery floor stays wet all day, and your feet feel permanently soggy. There's a damp smell that follows you. You can't shake it anymore. Then comes the midday chaos. Luncheon, which, to be clear, isn't your lunch. No, that comes later, if there's time. Luncheon is for the family. You help prepare tarts, cold meats, tiny sandwiches stacked like edible dominoes. Everything must be elegant, which means everything takes 10 times longer. And in the middle of this, another chore. You're sent to the drawing room with a soft cloth and a tray of beeswax. Every surface must shine, the legs of the tables, the backs of the chairs, the brass fireplace tools. There's a strange rhythm to it. Buff, circle, check the light, buff again. You polish until you can see your own face reflected in things that will never belong to you. One of the guests strolls in, doesn't see you at first, then glances your way, doesn't speak, just tosses a handkerchief on the floor as they pass. You stoop to pick it up, face burning, and remind yourself to breathe. It's part of the job. Invisible, polite, silent. Historians still argue whether servants were truly unseen or if they were just ignored out of habit. Some noble diaries mention their staff fondly, others don't mention them at all. Finally, your own meal. A slice of cold bread, a bit of cheese, maybe a boiled egg if someone was feeling generous. You eat fast, in a corner, away from view. A moment of peace, until someone calls your name. Firewood needs splitting. You head to the yard, grabbing the axe on the way. You swing until your shoulders ache and the splinters fly. Then you carry bundles inside, stacking them by the hearths. Your clothes smell like smoke and pine resin. You've stopped noticing. Late afternoon means chamber duties. You scrub chamber pots, air out the rooms, smooth out blankets. One time you forgot to close a window, and the parlor curtains flapped so wildly they knocked over a vase. You didn't sit down for dinner that night because you were still outside cleaning mud off the marble steps. You find a moment to wash your face. The basin water is lukewarm, but it feels like heaven. You look in the mirror, just briefly. You barely recognize the person there. But your hands are clean. That'll have to be enough. Evening brings dinner service, a full orchestration of silver platters, gravy boats, and tongue-biting etiquette. You glide between courses, refilling goblets, retrieving discarded napkins, collecting half-eaten quail bones. It's not glamorous, but it's work. Then the cleanup begins. The fire dims. The guests retire. You scrape plates, mop floors, rinse goblets. Everything must be spotless before morning. The lady likes her tea tray served on a surface so clean a bee could land without slipping. You finally drag yourself upstairs. The house is quiet now. Even the floorboards seem to sigh with exhaustion. You slip out of your uniform, fingers trembling. There's a cut on your thumb you didn't notice before. You lie down. You close your eyes. And somewhere below, the cook is already prepping breakfast. Sleep doesn't last long. You wake to a strange silence. Unnatural, almost. No pots clanging, no footsteps overhead, just the still air pressing against your ears. You sit up in the darkness, heart ticking like a pocket watch. And then you remember. It's Sunday. Not a full day off. Not really. But there's a rhythm shift, a softness to the morning. The household moves slower. The master and mistress attend chapel. The cook makes porridge instead of eggs. You breathe just a little easier. You dress quickly and head to the laundry yard, because while some duties pause, others don't. Sunday is washing day, and laundry in this era is less a task and more a campaign. You start with heating the water, fire under the copper kettle. It takes ages to boil. Meanwhile, you sort the linens, bed sheets, underclothes, servant uniforms, and of course the master's starched cravats, which must be perfectly white or risk a public embarrassment. No pressure. The laundry soap smells like boiled fat and wood ash, because that's what it is. You stir the mixture in with a wooden paddle, the lye stinging your eyes. Gloves aren't a thing yet, not for people like you. Your hands are red before the first sheet even goes in. Fun historical tidbit: urine was once a common ingredient in laundry, prized for its ammonia content. You're grateful the household has upgraded to lye, mostly. You haul out a heavy shirt from the tub. Wring it. Rinse it. Wring it again. The movement is rhythmic, punishing. Your arms ache, your back burns, but there's something almost meditative about it. You get lost in the heat, the steam, the scent of damp cloth and firewood smoke. Then the wringer, if your house is fancy enough to have one. If not, it's more wringing by hand. And then, hanging. You pin wet garments to a sagging line stretched between two apple trees. The wind is brisk, tugging the fabric like impatient children. You watch shirts flap like ghosts in the orchard. Laundry day isn't just chores, it's gossip day too. One of the older maids passes by with a basket of linens and leans in with a whisper. Apparently, the upstairs governess has been caught slipping extra butter into her chamber at night. You raise an eyebrow. Butter theft is serious business in a house this size. The hierarchy among servants is strict, but it's also full of quiet rebellion. Secret tea leaves, extra helpings, letters smuggled out through the delivery boy. You've learned how to move without being seen, how to speak without words, how to hold grudges with a smile. Historians still argue whether these dynamics were acts of survival or subtle defiance, mini rebellions pressed between starch and silverware. Either way, it keeps the long days interesting. After laundry, you're sent to the linen closet to sort napkins by size and towel by thread count. You fold with almost religious precision. One edge off, and you'll have to refold the entire stack. You whisper curses into the folds. The linen never judges. You sneak a moment by the window. Outside, the master's children run across the lawn with wooden hoops, laughing like fairies. You smile before you even realize it. Then quickly return to folding. Later, you're assigned candle duty, trimming wicks, replacing holders, scraping wax off brass trays with a blunt knife. You work slowly, carefully. The wax peels away like soft bark. You save the scraps. Those get melted down and reused, of course. Nothing is wasted in this house except compliments. You take a short break, officially polishing the brass. But really, you sit in the servant's stairwell, sipping a bit of weak tea from a chipped mug. The wall here is warm from the kitchen fire. Someone left a biscuit behind. You split it with the stable hand, neither of you saying much. Break over. It's time for shoes. You gather a dozen pairs from the hall, riding boots, house slippers, ballroom heels. You line them up like soldiers, then scrub, buff, and polish. Each pair must shine without looking too new. There's a fine art to invisible perfection. One quirky detail: some lords liked their boots brushed with champagne. The bubbles, they believed, gave leather a fine gleam. You've never been allowed to try it. By evening, your stomach grumbles again. Dinner in the servants' hall is simpler on Sundays. Soup and stale bread, maybe a slice of pudding if the kitchen was generous. You sit quietly, shoulders sore, mind wandering. You wonder about the outside world. What's it like to walk through a market square with no errands to run, or lie in a meadow without worrying who's watching, to sleep until your body decides instead of a bell? You tuck the thoughts away. Dreams here are private currency. You spend them only at night, when the house sleeps and the hearth dies down. Back upstairs, you replace the candles, smooth the pillows, turn down the beds. You catch your reflection in a mirror, dust-smudged, fire-lit, strange. For a moment, you imagine you're the lady of the house, walking through the corridor, silk brushing your ankles, not a worry in the world. Then you blink, and your hands are still calloused, still red, but still yours. You return to your cot, toes aching, back hollow. You pull the scratchy wool blanket up to your chin. It smells of lavender and lye. Tomorrow, the bell rings again. You wake before the sun again, because of course you do. But something's different this morning. You're being pulled from your bed, not by the breakfast bell, but by the kitchen maid. She's breathless, panicked, whispering fast. The mistress is having a fit. You don't ask what kind. You just run. This is the part of being a servant no one really tells you about. When your role morphs from worker to witness, from laundry folder to crisis manager. The mistress has collapsed on the fainting couch, her hair half-pinned, slippers mismatched. She's weeping, fanning herself, and hurling insults at no one in particular. The lady's maid is already there, offering a damp cloth and murmured reassurances. You keep to the wall, invisible but present. Someone will be blamed eventually. You'd rather not give them a name to start with. When things calm down, after the tea, the camphor, the tightly drawn curtains, you slip out and get back to your regularly scheduled chaos. Today, you've been assigned to guest prep, because nothing spikes the blood pressure in a noble house like unexpected visitors. You start with the drawing room, dusting, polishing, arranging fresh flowers so it looks like they weren't arranged at all. Every vase must feel effortless, like the house is just naturally elegant. And the moment you finish arranging one bouquet, someone else rearranges it behind you. Historians still argue whether noble households operated on actual order or the illusion of control. Judging by today's flower politics, the answer seems obvious. Once the drawing room is deemed acceptable by someone 2 pay grades above you, you're sent to check the guest linens. They must be pristine, not clean enough, not probably washed last week. They must smell of lavender, feel like clouds, and be folded with corners sharp enough to cut dreams. You find a stain on one pillowcase, a pale shadow, barely noticeable, and your heart drops. You quietly swap it for one from your own quarters. No one will know, unless they do. And then, well, you'll deal with that later. The kitchen is a war zone. The cook is shouting about veal, the scullery boy just dropped a pot, and someone swears the sugar tin is missing. You tiptoe through it all, grabbing the tea service tray. You carry it to the breakfast parlor with the delicate concentration of someone balancing a nuclear code. The master doesn't notice. He never does, but the butler nods slightly. It's the closest you've ever received to a compliment. You retreat through the servants' passageway, wiping sweat from your forehead with your sleeve. Your feet ache already, and it's not even noon. Fun fact, some noble houses required servants to wear specific shoes with felt soles so their footsteps wouldn't echo through the halls. Silence was part of the architecture. You check the guest chamber again. Someone left the window open. The curtains flutter like gossip. You fix them, then catch your reflection in the mirror. You look like you've aged a year in the last hour. You sigh, and then you're off again, this time to help with wardrobe. Because guests don't just need beds, they need fashion coordination. The lady's maid needs extra hands to lay out gowns, shine shoes, and steam wrinkles from silk. You hold the skirts as they're inspected. You pin hems with your teeth. You breathe in fabric, starch, and anxiety. Then someone panics. The mistress wants her sapphire necklace, the one kept in the locked drawer, but the key is with the master, and he's out riding, and the guests arrive in an hour. Everyone begins to move faster, but not louder. There's an art to noble panic. It glides. You're sent to the stables to find the master. The path is muddy. Your boots sink. A goose chases you. You find the master by the orchard, sipping something from a silver flask and lecturing the stable hand about fencing technique. He barely glances at you as he hands over the key. Back at the house, the necklace is retrieved, polished, fastened. Crisis averted. Your reward? You get to carry chamber pots down the back stairs? You manage not to spill, which, honestly, feels like a miracle today. The guests arrive in a flurry of cloaks, perfume, and peacock feathers. They are charming and loud and completely unaware of the storm of preparation behind their arrival. You watch them laugh as they remove gloves, sip sherry, and compliment the charmingly effortless decor. Your hands are still damp from scrubbing their teacups. Dinner prep begins early. Candles are lit. Silver is shined again. The footmen rehearse synchronized bowing like some aristocratic ballet troupe. You're given a list of guest allergies and drink preferences, even though no one will remember them past the soup course. You dart upstairs to adjust the pillows again. Apparently, one was too lumpy. You've stopped asking questions. You just fluff. The dining room is a sea of gleam and glass, napkins folded like swans, butter molded into roses, and somewhere behind the pantry door, a maid is weeping quietly because she broke a gravy boat. You get 10 minutes for supper, bread and soup in the servants' hall. You eat standing. It's warm. That's enough. As the night wears on, you listen to the music drifting down from the ballroom. Laughter, piano, clinking glasses. You lean against the kitchen wall and let your eyes close for a moment. Just a moment. Then someone's calling for towels. You're back on your feet. Because in this house, behind every elegant guest, lies an exhausted servant holding a tray, a towel, or a grudge. You're up before dawn again, of course, because the guests stayed late, and somehow you're still the one expected to rise early. Your body aches in ways that feel ancient. You consider briefly if this is what it feels like to be 300 years old. Then you roll out of bed and hit the floor running, well, stumbling. Your first task, the fireplaces. Because nobility may enjoy a roaring hearth, but they certainly won't light it themselves. You carry ash buckets down narrow halls and up creaking staircases, careful not to spill soot on the polished floors that someone else will still blame you for. Your hands are already black, your apron already ruined. A good day, then. As you kneel to coax a reluctant fire back to life in the guest wing, you overhear two ladies whispering behind the door about how pleasantly rustic everything is. You smile, bitterly, as smoke gets in your eyes. Downstairs, the breakfast shift has begun. You're not in the kitchen this morning, but you are fetching. Constantly, more eggs, hotter tea, less burnt toast. You bring up trays with precision, careful not to clink the porcelain. The master hates clinking. In the corridor, you pass the second footman holding a stack of newspapers the size of a small mattress. He looks at you and sighs. You sigh back. It's like a secret handshake between the perpetually tired. After breakfast, the household begins what they like to call a quiet morning. For servants, this translates to everything must be done noiselessly, invisibly, and perfectly. Heaven forbid a guest hears a mop. You're polishing silver when you're summoned to the nursery. Not because you're a nursemaid, but because you're the only one available to help. The baby has had an incident. You don't ask. You just bring the hot water and a fresh blanket. The governess thanks you in a whisper, as though the child might explode if startled. It's worth noting, children in noble homes were often seen less by their own parents and more by their nurses, governesses, and a rotating cast of servants. Historians still argue whether this detachment was emotional distance or simply practicality. Either way, you're the one wiping puree off the walls today. The bells ring again, this time from the upper corridor. Guest laundry, which of course must be returned within the hour, ironed and folded as if by angels. You haul the damp bundle downstairs, nearly slip on a stair, and remember why so many household accidents happen to the staff. Then you spend 20 minutes trying to remove a wine stain from a lace cuff with lemon juice and prayer. You succeed. Barely. Then you're drafted into garden detail, which sounds poetic, but mostly involves picking dead petals off the rose bushes so they look perfectly immortal when viewed from the guest chamber windows. You do this in silence, alongside a girl who hasn't spoken since Monday. She might be conserving energy, or plotting an escape. You return inside to find the scullery in chaos. The meat delivery has arrived late, and now the cook is threatening to quit again. You don't speak. You hand her a cup of tea and step carefully away. Later, she'll swear she never yelled at you. That's just how she talks. One quirky fact. In some noble households, meals for the staff were prepared with the scraps left from the family's table, but on big feast days, servants sometimes ate better than nobles because the kitchen always over-prepared. Today's lunch: lukewarm stew and a slice of bread that's more air than substance. Still, you eat every crumb. Afternoon chores arrive like a wave: curtains to be dusted, carpets to be beaten, library shelves to be straightened, though no one has touched a book in weeks. You find a dead moth between volumes of poetry and wonder if that's a metaphor. Then it's time for tea service again. You glide through the drawing room with a tray of scones and clotted cream, placing each item with the solemnity of a priest performing communion. The guests thank you without looking up. One spills tea. No one notices but you, and when you return to the kitchen, you're told that dinner is being moved up by 30 minutes. You nod. Internally, you scream. Dinner prep is a frenzy. Silverware must gleam. Napkins must be folded into swans. Again. You manage to cut your finger polishing a butter knife. You wrap it in linen and keep going. Blood isn't elegant. While the nobles dress for dinner, you're fetching jewelry, fetching fans, fetching more lemon water for the mistress, who insists her throat is unusually delicate tonight. She's wearing the sapphire necklace, the one you nearly ruined 2 nights ago. You try not to look at it too long. Dinner passes in a blur. You serve, you stand, you clear, you do it all again in reverse. And then, the late-night cleanup. You're stacking plates when the first footman leans in and whispers, "Someone dropped a wine glass in the west corridor." Of course they did. You find the mess. You clean it. You mop the floor and blot the rug, and somehow remove red wine from brocade without losing your mind. You wonder if you should patent your technique. Or cry. You choose neither. You just keep working. By the time you return to your quarters, your feet are numb. Your hands are raw. Your stomach growls. You chew a biscuit in the dark and fall asleep half-dressed. Outside, the moon shines over the estate, serene and silent. Inside, a servant dreams of someday sleeping until sunrise. The bell wakes you, not the polite chime from upstairs, the sharp metallic clang of the main kitchen bell. Something urgent, something annoying, something that ensures your eyes open before your body is ready. You sit up in your narrow bed, blanket half-tangled, hair a mess, soul somewhere still in dreamland. The message comes down quickly. Surprise guests have arrived. 3 of them, possibly 4. No one knows. The footman is pale. The cook is fuming. You are unsurprised, because in a noble house, surprises aren't exciting. They're exhausting. You scramble into uniform. No time for breakfast. Maybe no time for breathing either. You're already pulling out the good silver, again. The surprise guests are staying for luncheon, and of course they'll expect a full table set as if it was planned for days. You're in the dining room, adjusting napkin folds that you just barely remember how to make when the butler appears and mutters, "The parlor curtains are wrong." The parlor curtains? Yes. Apparently the wrong tassels are showing. You drop everything, rush into the parlor, and rearrange 30 pounds of brocade because Lady Surprise Guest has a known sensitivity to clashing tassels. You don't ask what that means. No one ever really knows. Back in the kitchen, you're stirring the soup. Don't ask how that happened, when the scullery maid bursts in, holding a fish. They said they wanted trout. "Is this trout?" she asks, eyes wide. You stare at it. It might be, or maybe it's a very shy salmon. Historians still argue whether noble households were truly this chaotic, or whether modern stories exaggerate the madness. But records from head housekeepers and journals from chambermaids suggest that yes, chaos was the default. Just hidden behind heavy drapes and tight smiles, you plate the soup, serve the troutish fish, pour the wine, you almost make it out alive. Then, disaster. A guest asks for a bath. You blink. A bath? Now? In the middle of the day? You smile, nod, begin mentally preparing the tub, the towels, the hot water, the perfume oil, the slippers, the linen robe, all for someone who just decided they needed a soak because the country air makes my skin dry. So, while they lounge in the tub, you lug buckets of water trying not to slosh. The bathroom is freezing, and of course the window must be cracked for freshness. You're soaked and cold and still trying to scrub the tub ring from the last emergency bath. Meanwhile, laundry. Because remember that guest who spilled wine on her gloves last night? She sent them down with a note. Urgent. The gloves are ruined. She still wants them spotless. You soak them in milk, dab vinegar, and whisper apologies to the fabric. No one ever says thank you for glove miracles. You don't mind. Much. Later that afternoon, you find yourself polishing doorknobs. Yes, doorknobs. Because someone thought they looked fingerprinted. And nothing ruins the aesthetic of aristocracy quite like smudged brass. You buff each one until your fingers go numb and the hallway glints like a jewelry case. One quirky detail. In especially large homes, there were sometimes secret competitions between departments. Kitchen versus drawing room, upstairs maids versus scullery staff, on who could keep their space the most pristine. Some housekeepers even kept cleanliness logs. No prizes, just pride. As you wipe down yet another candlestick, a child runs past and grabs your apron. You freeze. Children are sweet. But children in noble houses are complicated. They're either overly precious or completely invisible, depending on the hour. This one wants to play. You politely decline and gently redirect her to the governess, who pretends not to see you. Outside, the sun starts to dip. You start to prepare for dinner. Again. It's a smaller crowd tonight, just 12, but the rules are the same. Perfect silver, perfect chairs, perfect everything. You're buttoning a tablecloth when a glass breaks in the hallway. You stiffen. Another servant rushes past, mumbling, "It was the spaniel," knocked over a vase. You're sent to clean it, of course. The dog watches you with zero remorse as you gather shards and mop muddy paw prints off the carpet. You whisper things at the dog that you would never say aloud. Dinner is long. You stand behind a chair like a statue, eyes alert, body still, mind floating somewhere between consciousness and a nap. The conversation is about opera, or parliament, or the weather in Italy. All you know is, you're not allowed to yawn. When the guests finally retire, you're left with crumbs, stains, empty wine bottles, and a headache. The kitchen is chaos again, plates everywhere, bones, spilled gravy. Someone drops a spoon. You pick it up. Someone else drops another spoon, just for fun. You don't flinch. You clean until the floor shines. By the time you make it back to your corner of the world, it's nearly midnight. You remove your apron, wash your hands in cold water, stare into the cracked mirror above the wash basin. Your reflection looks tired, but oddly proud. You survived another day. You slip into bed, hearing distant laughter upstairs. The nobles are drinking brandy. You're drinking silence. And somehow it's just as intoxicating. You wake before dawn, as always. The world is dark and quiet, except for the creaking floorboard beneath your bed and the gentle whistle of wind through the old window panes. Your back aches, your eyelids protest, but you swing your legs down anyway. Duty doesn't sleep in. You move in silence, slipping into your uniform in the half-light. It's cold. It's always cold. You button your collar, smooth your apron, and head down the back stairs, every step a whisper. In the kitchen, the cook is already up, muttering something about burned oats and too much pepper in the stew. You greet her with a sleepy nod and start your usual routine, lighting the fires, checking the coals, setting the water to boil. The house is still for a moment, just the crackle of flame and the low rustle of fabric as you move. Then it begins. The bell rings upstairs. Someone's awake. You brace yourself. Because no matter how many days you've lived through in this noble house, there's always something new to navigate. A sudden demand, a new protocol, a guest who doesn't like to be looked at before tea. You bring up the breakfast tray with trembling hands, balancing porcelain like a tightrope walker. You knock, you enter, you set it down, you smile. The lady of the house doesn't look at you. She's reading a letter. She just says, "The marmalade is the wrong kind." You apologize. She waves you away. You head back downstairs and, without a word, begin preparing the correct marmalade, which looks exactly like the first. But you don't say anything, because you've learned, often it's not about the marmalade. It's about being seen. It's about control. Historians still argue whether servants were truly invisible or if they wielded subtle power within these grand houses. Some accounts suggest maids and footmen knew more about their employers than even their own families did. They heard the whispered arguments, saw the hidden glances, knew which heirlooms were secretly fakes and which marriages were quietly unraveling. You sweep the hallway next. The morning sun spills in through stained glass windows, painting red and gold patterns on the tiles. It's beautiful in that melancholy way. You pause for half a second and admire it, then keep sweeping. The gardener passes by the window, tipping his cap. You wave. He's one of the few people who understands that even though you're both in service, the worlds you move through are very different. You clean velvet. He cleans dirt. After lunch, you help the housekeeper inventory the linen closet. It's the kind of job that makes your eyes blur, dozens of nearly identical napkins, folded and refolded, every stitch inspected. There's a rumor going around that the Duke's sister might be visiting. She's notoriously picky about linen. The staff jokes she can sense a wrinkle through walls. You don't laugh, because she might arrive, tonight. And if she does, you'll be the one ironing until dawn. One quirky truth: many noble families had laundry codes embroidered into linens, tiny symbols to identify which pieces belonged to which rooms, which guests, which seasons. They were invisible to outsiders, but to staff, it was like reading a secret language. One misplaced napkin could lead to chaos. You're cleaning the library now, dusting the spines of books no one reads. You pause at one titled, "On Proper Etiquette and Conduct for Young Gentlewomen." You almost snort. Almost. You pull the feather duster along the shelf, humming quietly, until you hear voices. In the next room, two guests are arguing in hushed tones, something about money, a debt, a scandal. You don't mean to listen, but there's nowhere else to go. You freeze, one hand still mid-dust. Eventually the voices fade. You resume your work. You won't repeat what you heard, not because of loyalty, but because you've learned the cost of gossip. Whispers travel faster than servants, and retribution comes in strange forms. Extra chores, missing wages, cold shoulders. As the afternoon stretches on, you tidy the drawing room, plump the cushions, reset the fire, remove the used teacups, half-drunk, lipstick-stained, forgotten like yesterday's news. You pass a mirror. You don't look. You've stopped looking, most days. Not because you dislike your reflection, but because it's easier to pretend you're not there. You're furniture, a shadow, the ghost who carries tea trays. Dinner comes again. You serve, you wait, you clear. The noblemen talk about Parliament. The noblewomen talk about Paris. You wonder what it's like to care about things that far away. Later that night, you're called to bring up a hot brick to warm a guest's bed. You wrap it carefully, knock gently, and step in. The guest thanks you. Actually thanks you. That's rare. You smile. He doesn't notice. You retreat down the stairs and exhale. The house begins to quiet. You blow out candles, latch windows, lock the front door. It's the end of another day. You crawl into bed, body buzzing with fatigue, mind still humming with the day's noise. The mattress is lumpy, the blanket is thin, but you're grateful. You made it through, and tomorrow it starts again. Just you, a bell, and a house full of porcelain and secrets.